Hello and welcome to a brand new art tutorial on Ayush paper. Today let's paint this beautiful lady in acrylic. I'm Prakriti, an artist and an art educator. I teach beginner and intermediate artists to paint confidently using reference images and create their own compositions using various mediums such as poster colors, gouache, and acrylic in an online membership based class called Paint with Prakriti. I teach from the foundation like color theory, blending, brush control, components of a landscape like trees, mountains, water, etc. in great detail. I also have a YouTube channel where I post tutorial videos on varied mediums and subjects. These are the main supplies we will be using. A detailed description of all the required supplies is mentioned in the description box below.
Let's start with the background. The background is quite blurry, so we won't be adding a lot of details. For the background, I'll be using different variations and tones of greens. I'll be using some dark green, some lemon yellow, black and white. We will create a mixture of this and create a blurry background. Take a flat brush and start dabbing the colors as shown. I'm adding darker colors on the sides and lighter colors in the center. Now I'm taking a oval mop brush and starting to blend all the colors. We need a very dry brush, do not dip it in water, and start blending this as shown. Use very slight pressure and see that all the colors blend together. Now if you are using your paper, a regular paper for as your surface, then this is going to be slightly difficult as paper tends to absorb the colors. However, if you are using a canvas or papers like acrylic paper that I'm using from Ayush paper, they tend to keep your paints wet for slightly longer time, helping me in blending these colors. So make sure you're using the right paper in case you want to blend this, or be very fast and do this. Alternatively, what you can do is you can apply a layer of green, light green all over the background. This will stop the paint from going through the paper, so it will create a plastic type of surface, and you're free to blend it and your paints will stay wet for longer. Now, if you don't have a mop brush, you can use any old makeup brush, but make sure the bristles do not fall off when painting because it's going to be very messy otherwise. Or you can also get a nice makeup brush and do this process. Let's start painting this part. It's mostly in a very light green. For this, I'm going to take some lemon yellow. I'm going to mix the deep green that we have on the palette to create this mixed paint for the lower part. Now apply evenly all over the surface. Now make sure to cover all parts of the surface in at least 2 layers. Most beginners tend to leave off the layer in just one go. We need to paint a minimum of 2 layers to get a good coverage and get that look of acrylic. If you see, this area is still transparent, so I'm going to go over this in another layer. Cover all the nooks and corner and all the edges with the background color. And with this we complete the background. Let's move on to color blocking the lady. Let's continue painting the skin colors. I'll be using flesh tint. For the shadows, I'll be using burnt sienna. We will also need white for the highlights later. I'm using a small flat brush of size 1 from a detailer set here. Mix a bit of flesh tint into burnt sienna to mute it down a bit and add this for the shadow part. These are generally in the creases of the dress, near the creases of the dress or crevices, or the places where the sunlight does not hit directly. Make sure to blend both the dark and light shades. This is very important. Make sure at all times you have covered the surface well. Apply 2-3 coats until whole of your paper is covered and it looks very smooth and neat. Similarly, we continue painting for the other hand. I will be painting right over the flowers that I had marked. We can do that later as well. Moving on, let's paint the hat. For the base color, I'm using a small amount of yellow ochre mixed with white to get a beige color.
Let's consider that sun is coming from this side, so we will have this part in a brighter shade and the rest of the part in a darker shade. Now to make the shade darker, I am mixing small amount of ultramarine blue to the previous mixture, which is yellow ochre plus white. I am going to leave off the space where sunlight is maximum, and rest of the area I am going to apply this darker shade. We will keep increasing the tone values of this as we go ahead, but these are the areas that I am just marking to show where the shadow is. I am also coloring the hair black. It's just black at this point. Now let's start painting the dress. I am taking ultramarine blue and just color blocking this area. Next I am taking some burnt sienna and adding some glow to the hair. This is where there is some sunlight falling on it. We will also add some white as highlight later on. I am now coloring the ribbon, which is like a slightly darker shade than the base color. So I mixed a little more yellow ochre to it, to the white mixture. Now I am brightening the area where the sunlight is maximum. It is also important to darken the shadows whenever you lighten the lighter parts. So this will make sure that the glow looks more real. I am also adding some white highlights wherever the sunlight is hitting on the edges. So take pure white and start adding in areas where the sunlight is hitting max. Now don't make it look like a border. We don't want a very animated looking picture. We need it to look more realistic. So you can look at the reference images, any image for that matter, whenever you're painting. This is a general tip. So look at it closely, observe well, and mark the areas that you see in highest sunlight with this highlights. Make sure to blend these highlights. We don't want it to stand as a line. Now we'll move on to add the patterns on this ribbon. It's a very simple pattern, but it's going to bring out the beauty of this hat so much. I absolutely love this. It's a very simple fishbone kind of pattern. So use a very thin brush to mark these lines. Also notice the direction of these lines. It's because we need to have that flow and the bend in the ribbon, so make sure you're giving it the right direction. Now I'm going to add the border for this ribbon. I'm adding yellow ochre directly to add borders. Now our hat is ready. Take some titanium white and add a thin line over here to show that shine that is hitting on the hair. So we are thinking of the sunlight falling from the right side, so all the shine will be more on the right side. Once we finish with the dress, we'll start working on the background. Let's start working on the dress now. For the dress, we have a base layer, but you can see the paper through it. All that needs to be covered now. Let's take some ultramarine blue. I will use black to darken the tone and white or the beige color that is on the palette to lighten the tone. I'll quickly add a layer of blue so all the paper that was seen is covered. Cover the whole part with just ultramarine blue for now. Let's start adding the shadows and highlights. For the shadows, I'll mix some black into ultramarine blue and add it in the shape of the creases or the folds and bends we see in the cloth. This is the darker part, so I'm adding black wherever I see these darker shadows on the dress. For the lighter part, I'll be mixing some beige that is there on the palette with the ultramarine blue and adding it right next to the shadows and blending it. Now we need to blend them in 3 layers. That is, we need to blend the shadow with the highlights and the highlight with the base layer of the dress. So this might take a little try and it might take a little while. Keep your patience and try blending this to the max. Now if you're not comfortable adding these folds and shadows, just add few, like just 1 or 2, so that you're not overwhelmed with a lot of folds, but you get to understand the technique. Like I said, I'm making a lighter shade of blue and adding it right next to the shadow that I had painted. So this already starts making it look like, you know, there is a depth in the cloth and there is a bend in the cloth, the different folds that we see and how the highlight is hitting the part that is not going down but rather looks more bulging. So all these things you need to observe carefully and start blending these shades, different shades that you apply. Blending is very, very important at this point.
For the blending to look smooth, it is important that all the colors are wet. Now you cannot blend once the colors are dry. So at all points, keep adding the colors that are right next to the colors you are blending. Like if you are blending the darker and lighter shades, make sure both the colors are applied freshly and blend it immediately. Now when you are blending it with the base layer, apply the base layer once again right next to these parts that you are blending and blend it immediately.
This will give you a smoother and easier finish. I use Ayush paper in most of my artworks. They have different papers for all kinds of mediums. I highly recommend using them to get a wonderful experience. These acrylic sheets are my favorite as they work extremely well with acrylics, poster colors and gouache too. Check out askayushpaper.com website where you can ask or answer any art and art life related questions. There are very interesting topics under discussion. Do visit.
Let's add some highlights to the places where the sunlight is hitting the max. I'm adding some on the shoulders and little bit on the arms as well. Let's start painting the bouquet she's holding. For this, I'm taking some sap green and lemon yellow and I've mixed a light green. I'm adding some leaves in this manner. Now we'll be adding different shades of leaves. For this, you can mix some black into your sap green or more yellow to lighten it or more black to darken it. Add different shades of leaves and make a nice bouquet in our hand. Let's also add some branches using yellow ochre. There will be flowers on this later on, so add some branches on all sides of the bouquet. For the background foliage, I'll be adding leaves and different structures of plants using different shades of green. You can also take some green in your finger and start rubbing it to give a blurred effect. Ayush paper acrylic sheet has texture and behaves very much like a canvas, so this helps me to blur these ends using my fingers. Just like you do it on a canvas, you are able to do it on these papers as well. Because paper matters to me the most, I use Ayush paper. Let's start adding the flowers. For this, I'm going to create a white base first. Just make a rough shape of flowers wherever you want to place the flowers. Place some flowers on the either side of the lady and also some on the back and some on her arms. So it looks like she's right in between the fields of flowers. Now we'll start adding colors to these flowers. I've taken a light purple color and I'm adding to some part of the flowers, mostly on the left side since we are having the sunlight falling on the right side. I'll be adding more white later on to highlight the falling of sunlight. For the darker shade or the center part of the flower, I'll be mixing some ultramarine blue with the purple and adding the center part of all these flowers. I'm adding more whites to the highlights so they look more brighter. I have added some yellow flowers on the right side just to add some colors. We are done with the painting. Let's remove the tape and see how our painting looks. I hope you enjoyed this video and you will give this a try. If you do try, do tag us. We would love to see and give you a shout out on social media. All the links are mentioned in the description box below. So here is our final painting, a lady in blue in beautiful flower fields.
That's all for today. Hope you all enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you for your support. If you have any questions on painting, comment in the comment box below. Stay tuned for more wonderful content on this channel. Bye.